Georgetown's rich collection of historical buildings remained relatively unscathed during the Japanese occupation. I Wouldn't Go In There continues now on the National Geographic Channel.
I came to Penang, Malaysia to investigate the history behind a ghost story. A ruthless Japanese soldier was said to haunt a former World War II fort. The ghost that the night guard believed he saw was based on a real person, a Japanese military police officer named Tadashi Suzuki. This Suzuki was no ghost, but a very real monster. While Suzuki never executed anyone at the fort, he did commit horrible crimes elsewhere in Penang. Suzuki seemed larger than life, a boogeyman or symbol for the true horrors that took place here. I sought out local historian Clement Liang. Hey, Clement.
Hi.
I'm Robert.
Yeah, welcome.
Nice to meet you. I'm trying to find out information about either an executioner or some sort of colonel in the Japanese army, perhaps, by the name of Suzuki. Do you know anything about him?
During the war, there was a guy called Tadashi Suzuki, and he was the head of the police force at Butterworth. He had this reputation of chopping off people's heads.
Clement confirmed what Robert David told me. Tadashi Suzuki was in Butterworth. But what about the fort on Penang Island? I heard Suzuki would torture and execute people at the fort. Is that true?
Not that I'm aware of. I have not read any record that he went to the fort and tortured people there. That fort was quite a distance away from town, and there's no reason why they need to bring the prisoners all the way there.
So is Suzuki responsible for all of the tortures and executions that are attributed to him?
Well, there are quite a number of villains. I would say Suzuki was just one of them.
Then Clement spoke of something much larger, something bigger than Suzuki's crimes.
The real massacre that happened was during 1942. In Chinese, we call it Sukching. During the campaigns, it's just like people being rounded up and, brought to some place where they were massacred en masse. And I think that is even worse than what Suzuki did.
Clement confirmed that Suzuki was never at the fort. It was too far away from population centers to be of practical use to the Japanese military police. But as head of the Japanese garrison police in Butterworth, he did play a role in a much larger terror that gripped Penang. Clement mentioned the Sukching. In English, the phrase meant to cleanse, to purge. Was the Sukching the real ghost of World War II still haunting Penang Island? I tracked down another survivor. Mr. Lim agreed to meet me at the anti-war memorial. Could you tell me about the occupation?
One morning I was bathing. Suddenly I heard bombing, boom, like that. And then, then I look out through the window. I saw dark clouds there. And then later, you have hundreds of people running along the streets and back lanes, And
that was the start of the war for you?
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like there was a pretty heavy Japanese presence in your daily life. Was it a violent time?
The heads were chopped off by the Japanese at the police headquarters in Penang Road. The head was chopped off, and then they were hung up in front of the market the next morning.
So you remember seeing heads hanging from poles?
Yes, I saw the head hanging there. I was so scared,
What kind of people were getting killed?
Mostly Chinese. All the people, thousands of them, lined up the whole streets, taken away.
The Penang anti-war monument recorded 5,000 people killed in the Sukching. Mr. Lim witnessed what happened to some of these victims. Suzuki was just one among many engaged in this organized murder of Chinese civilians. There was a deeper history to this Japanese animosity towards the Chinese.
And then it happened. That which is stronger than stone walls had at last been born in China. The will to resist.
In 1937, nearly 200,000 Chinese rebelled against their Japanese occupiers in China. The Japanese wanted to ensure there wasn't another Chinese rebellion in Malaya. So they mapped out a cruel strategy entitled Implementation Guideline for Manipulating Overseas Chinese. It called for eliminating anyone who failed to obey or cooperate. I wanted to know how far this elimination strategy had gone here in Penang. The Penang Anti-War Memorial listed 4 mass grave sites where victims of the Suk Ching were buried. But then I found something odd. An account of a 5th mass grave, a place called Rifle Range. It wasn't listed on the memorial. Was there a reason why it was left out? I wanted to see for myself. A sprawling cemetery. This was where Rifle Range was supposed to be. I was expecting a monument for victims of the Suk Ching. I'm looking for mass graves from the Suk Ching massacre. Are they here?
No, there is no mass grave for the Suk Ching victims here. A few who died from explosions are buried here, but there is no mass grave. I have a few records here. They indicate that there are individual graves, but no mass grave.
But there's supposed to be a mass grave at Rifle Range.
No. This is Batu Gantung, not Rifle Range.
So I came here looking for mass graves, and it turns out I came to the wrong place. The bodies aren't in this cemetery. They're at that apartment complex over there. That's Rifle Range. And so I'm going to head over there and see what else I can find out. The thought crossed my mind. Could an entire housing estate have been built over a mass grave? A huge cemetery abutted a rather run-down housing block. But where was the mass burial site? I was given the name of an eyewitness who could tell me about the mass grave. Uncle Tan, I heard you could tell me about the mass graves here at Rifle Range. What do you remember about them?
Before Japanese come, and then 他埋了很多人这里，他打死了很多平民啊。所以啊，这里啊，这个地区啊，埋了很多这个人。
Were these bodies from the Suk Ching massacre?
Yeah, 肃清啊。Yeah. 日本人肃清的时候，是了，他们没有讲道理的，他就是这样埋，打死了就这样埋下去了。
So you saw the bones?
Yeah， 因为我们刚搬进来的时候啊，我们来看屋子的时候啊，他这个屋子有那个拖拉机啊，挖起来，我们看到了，所以我们看到很多骨头啊。
How long ago was this?
50 years.
50 years ago, wow. So the 60s?
Yeah.
1960s.
Yeah.
So I just spoke with Uncle Tan, and it turns out that there were mass graves here at these Rifle Range apartments. Where the bodies were moved, I don't know, but they were here.
Two brave investigators